It is Wednesday, the 1st of July. I'm Maeve McMahon, and this is Europe Today, your daily update of European news and analysis, live here on Euronews. Coming up, from roads melting, tram tracks buckling to mounting deaths and heat stress, Europe's heatwave is intensifying. This as a deal to permanently end the war in the Middle East and resolve the energy crisis remains elusive. For The View from the European Parliament's biggest and most powerful political group, we'll be joined exclusively here on set by the President of the European People's Party, Manfred Weber. Plus, Ireland takes over the rotating presidency of the Council of the European Union today. For the next 6 months, the Irish government will chair 280 meetings and help steer the Union's legislative agenda. We'll be crossing live to Dublin Castle to speak to Ireland's European Affairs Minister Thomas Byrne, where Ukraine's President Zelensky has also arrived today for the ceremony. And in an attempt to stop the desertification of Europe's high streets, the EU will from today impose a €3 fee on small parcels from China, mainly platforms such as Shein and Temu. The aim, of course, is to curb the flow of cheap imports and encourage consumers to think twice about how they shop. But first, Europe's deadly heatwave has broken records in the east of the continent, and although millions of northern and southern Europeans are enjoying some fresh air this week, temperatures are set to rise this weekend, putting infrastructure and public services under increasing strain. And the issue is also becoming increasingly political. We can debrief now here on set with our Europe editor, Maria Tadeo. Good morning, Maria. Just tell us, what is the latest on the temperatures front and also on the political debate around it?
Well, certainly. Good morning, Maeve. Because it is political, it's about the politics of climate, but also the politics around policy when it comes to the Green Deal. And as you say, when you look at the temperatures, they are going up again. They will be picking up in the Iberian Peninsula, in France, here too, in Belgium, parts of Germany, Switzerland. So we see now going into the weekend, we're looking at around 30 degrees Celsius. Of course, the big question now, and this is a key matter, it's not a trivial question, is whether this heat wave, this pickup in temperatures, would look similar in intensity and length compared to the one that we just came out from on June 21st. I remember we had almost 7 days of temperatures that smashed records, but also put a lot of strain, under strain, public transportation and also healthcare. When you look at the reality of this is not a trivial matter, and this is not a question of, well, it's summer, so obviously the temperatures will go up. The figures show us that from June 21st until now, there was an excess death rate of 1,300 people. So this has become a real question of public health. What the experts also suggest is that when you look at heat waves, they are becoming more pronounced, but also more regular. And a lot of this, to go back to an initial point, which is the politics around this, the idea of very hot summers, the air conditioning, again, that has crystallized a debate among those who say there is a necessity now in Europe. These temperatures will become the new normal. And there is also a question of comfort, the idea of mass installation of air conditioning, using it more. Remember, for many years, it was vilified in Europe to install air conditioners all over the place. It's not a concept that is very natural, organic for Europeans, versus those who now say, if you believe the way to fix these temperatures. Again, I go back and point to Teresa Rivera, for example. She is the executive vice president of the Commission, but also a very outspoken European climate advocate. She says, if you believe the way to deal with this is just to install AC, there is a fundamental issue. And all of that also picks up on the question of the Green Deal. The Europeans made a pledge in 2019 to cut emissions. The question now is, can this Green Deal, as it was created, and obviously to see the benefits of it, there will be time and money that will have to be invested. Can it be sustained? Or ultimately, we're going into dismantling of it. And this heat wave that we've seen this summer may accelerate that process.
OK, Maria Tadeo, you're better. Thank you so much for that analysis. And now for his view on all of this, coming up, we'll be joined by Manfred Weber, the President of the European People's Party, Europe's largest political group. German member of the CSU, Manfred Weber, has been a member of the European Parliament since 2004 and is one of the European Parliament's most influential and most powerful politicians. So obviously he's a very busy man. So we're thrilled that you made it here to the Europe Today set. Welcome.
Thank you so much. Good morning.
Great to have you with us. Look, this heat wave that we're seeing, is that just normal June weather in your view, or is it climate change? Is it global warming?
Well, that's up to the scientists and experts to assess this. It's not up to the politicians. We see an abnormal situation, that's clear, and we face a new reality on European level, and we have to prepare for this. So on the one hand, I'm quite proud as a European politician that we did the Green Deal, that we are going forward, that Europe was the continent who made the Paris Agreement. You remember when we had a global agreement on the fight against climate change, we made it possible. So Europe showed leadership.
But your party has been tinkering away at the Green Deal, rolling back parts of the Green Deal.
My party is Ursula von der Leyen party. My party is the party who did the Green Deal in the last mandate, and we fully support the Green Deal. It's our responsibility in today's world to deliver on these aspects. What we are asking for is to be reasonable in the business aspect, and that is what we are. We cannot kill our industry due to climate change. That is what we are asking for. So we need a common understanding to bring things in balance. That's always EPP approach.
And now jeopardising the debate, of course, is this conversation over aircon, whether to invest in air conditioning. Where is your view here? Is it a necessity or a luxury?
It's a necessity, no doubt about this. In former times, it was no question at all that we need heating in the north of Europe because it's colder there. There's no question. And today, if climate change, if hotter temperatures are arriving, we need also air conditioning. So it's a question of practical needs and to invest there. The European Union,
even though the scientists would argue that would go against the goals of the climate plan?
I don't see it like this, especially on air conditioning. We have the big advantage that if you also combine it with photovoltaic, so with solar panels, then you can easily use the solar energy for air conditioning. So that's not in contradiction. We have that way towards green, sustainable energy production in Europe, to be not anymore depending on the Strait of Hormuz, to use also another debate of the last weeks, that we are ready for the future, and then we can challenge this.
So you're clearly going against the Teresa Ribera. Do you have your aircon on in your office today?
I think so. I hope so. That works, yes.
OK. Well, many, of course, Europeans do not because they can't afford it. But let's move from climate to migration. The Parliament has just approved a law on these very controversial return hubs. Should EU money be spent on these return hubs, Mr. Weber?
It must work. In this moment of time, only 20% of the decisions that someone must leave the European Union is an illegal here, and not from a politician. It's from a judge. It's from an official service in the European Union. If someone is illegal, he has to leave the European Union, and only 20% are enforced in this moment.
And who should pay for these return hubs?
Well, return hub is only one part of a big legislation. And just to remind everyone, we were fighting about this migration thing for more than 10 years in Europe. It created a lot
Since Lampedusa in 2013.
It created a lot of problems and also created a lot of right extreme parties. And now I am proud as European politician that I can tell people that we have now a solution, that 25 member states agreed, that all centre parties agreed. We do it together and we have an answer on this. We enforce it, and the main message is the state decides who is arriving and not the smugglers in the Mediterranean Sea.
And which countries will these return hubs be in?
Well, it's now up to the member states, so they have
What's your preference?
It's not up to us on European level to decide about this. We have partners in Africa, in the Middle East, where we can work with, but it's up now to the colleagues to coordinate and to find partners. And it's not a must, If France and other countries are not using this option, then it's fine. But we have to enforce it. It must work.
And what you mentioned France. What about Spain, though? This week, of course, big news with Pedro Sanchez saying that 1 million people have applied for his programme for undocumented migrants. He argues that without immigration, Spain would lose 19% of its GDP by 2050. Does he have a point?
Well, Europe needs migration and legal migration. We need workers for our care system, for example. So that's obvious.
So do you support his plan?
The key question is who is invited to stay here. And if you legalize all illegals who are today in Spain, that's not the persons and personalities we need. We need qualified people who can really contribute to our system. And that is not happening in Spain.
These people, though, will contribute.
By the way, if we speak about a number of above 1 million people, that's not normal migration. That's not normal migration when you have such a massive increase.
But these people are already in the country working illegally. They're undocumented. So now if they become legal, they'll contribute.
That's up to the authorities to assess this. Again, nothing against legal migration. But again, if you speak about 1 million in a few weeks to be legalized, that's not a normal procedure. I hope that this is not a normal procedure. That's why I'm not in favor of this. And that has also impact to the others. So if Spain is doing it, they have the right of freedom of movement. They can go to France, they can go to Belgium, they can go to Poland.
Are these people a threat, do you think?
That's why it is an issue for all of us. And that's why I would expect that also leaders speak about these kind of massive 1 million people. Massive legalization, that's an issue for Europe.
Another big issue for Europe, China. We saw those very delicate talks this Monday night between Maroš Šefčovič and his counterpart from Commerce. They've put October now as a deadline. Is this just to avoid confrontation with China?
No, we have a totally fundamentally change of our approach to China. Stop naivety. We need a level playing field where we clarify that subsidies cannot be part of a free market economy perspective. And I'm also sure that we have to talk about the digital infrastructure of Europe. For example, the 6G infrastructure of tomorrow, though, if we invest in digital infrastructure, must be China-free. So I think we have to be clear that the new world is arriving and China must understand this.
And which team are you on here? Team Ursula von der Leyen or Team Friedrich Merz? They have completely different views vis-à-vis China.
We also have Team Emmanuel Macron. We have different teams in Europe. I would ask for one team, and I'm on the side of Šefčovič in Europe to defend our European interests. Stop naivety. That's the main message. Continue to do business, no problem on this, but stop naivety.
What if there's no deal, though, by October?
Then we are entering into a phase of a conflict, and we have to be clear that European Union, we speak about 450 million consumers. We are strong. We are economically the world power of this world.
And does conflict mean trade war, in your view?
I don't ask for it. I don't look for a kind of conflict. But the Chinese must understand that the overcapacities, again with solar panels, they did it already to occupy the global market, and the same want to do on the electric vehicles, on the electric cars. And we cannot allow this. We are the continent of trading. We are the continent of free market. No question on this. But it must be fair. And it must be level playing field.
And just on that point, you mentioned trade. You finally have the trade deal over the line with the United States. But just last week, we heard that announcement that President Trump might introduce tariffs because of the digital taxes Europe's imposing on the Americans. What does that mean then for the deal that you supported?
Well, I'm a man of transatlantic cooperation. I love to work together with the Americans. The current president is a special one. Everybody knows it. But we have now the deal. We have agreed on it. Europe delivered. As we promised it, and the EPP party was the adult in the room, others were playing on this. We always said from the very first moment on that our business needs certainty, needs stability now in the trade relationship with America. That's why good that we have it now. And if we continue the fight, then I should also say, let's stand up as Europeans and be proud again. 450 million consumers means also for America that we are the biggest external market for them. So let's use this power.
And if he makes good on these new tariffs, will you pull out of the deal, the Thunberg deal?
We want to keep the deal, and I would advise us not to react on every tweet and every message from Donald Trump, because in every morning show we speak about Trump, and that is exactly what he wants to do.
Do you think he's just bluffing?
Let's talk about us. Let's talk about our strengths and our values, what we stand for, and especially on the trade issue. We have now Australia, we have New Zealand, we have Mexico, we have Japan, we have Mercosur now in place, enforced. I'm happy. My party was always a party of free trade, and we believe that having with China and also with America more problems, we have to look for others who are rule-based, who love to work together, rule-based and value-based, and that's why there's a huge opportunity now for the biggest market in the world, and that is the European Union.
And as you say, we need to focus on ourselves, focus on Europeans. What's the new mood now in Europe regarding the new Hungarian head of state, Peter Mayer?
Well, I visited him 2 years ago when he entered into European politics, European Parliament. His TISA party first time was elected in Hungary, and I invited him to join the EPP group in the European Parliament. He accepted this, and he repaid this investment of trust now with a huge success. Last week when we had our gathering of the EPP leaders with Merz and all the colleagues, Peter Magyar was the first time inside of the EPP family being present, and it was a moment of big strength and also pride because the Hungarian voice is back on the European level.
And will it be back when it comes to Ukraine?
Well, he already committed, 90 billion. He approved it. He gave green light. And also the first chapters on the negotiations now, he already agreed. He already gave green light. So we see the fundamental change now. Orban is gone, and all right extreme, all right populists in Europe have a big problem because their hero lost elections against young EPP leader Peter Magyar.
And just on a lighter note, I'm sure you've been watching the World Cup. The Mannschaft is out.
True, and I have now, as a German, I have to consider now what I'm looking for and what I'm supporting for. So we still have a lot of European teams being present.
Who are you
there,
supporting?
And let's see how they perform, and wish them all the best.
Is it time for Julian Nagelsmann to stand aside?
Well, losing is never a good thing, and in this moment of time, especially in this game, we saw a lack of engagement. I respect every individual player, but there was a lack of engagement, and that's why it has to be discussed.
And now that Germany's out, who, Manfred Weber, will you support?
Well, hard question. I keep neutrality in this moment of time.
Okay, thank you so much, Manfred Weber, our guest here on Europe Today, for joining us. And speaking of neutrality, moving on, an EU member since 1973, Ireland takes over the rotating presidency of the European Union today for the next 6 months. Ukraine's President Zelensky has arrived in Dublin for the symbolic ceremony that will take place today in Dublin Castle. For more, we can straight head over to the castle and bring in the Irish Minister for European Affairs, Thomas Byrne. Good morning, Minister. So lovely to have you on Europe today. Just tell us, President Zelensky has arrived for the proceedings. This is the first surprise, if you like, of the presidency.
Yeah, well, we're delighted that President Zelensky is here. President Costa of the European Council will be here as well. This will be a ceremony, I suppose, to mark the opening day. It's not just ceremonial. We have about 20 meetings of working parties in Brussels happening today. I've already got calls from senior MEPs on particular files this morning. So we're starting with action. We're starting straight into it, and it's a very exciting moment for all of us here in the Irish system. It's a generational moment. We have some really important files on enlargement when you mention Ukraine, but also on the MFF and the One Market Roadmap as well. These are key files for Ireland, but also for Europe.
Just on Ukraine, how will you advance the talks on their membership into the EU over the next 6 months?
Well, look, we've already achieved a lot now at the end of the Cyprus presidency, and I want to pay tribute to them for that. So our ambition is to open more clusters in the negotiations with Ukraine. So we're already working on that. We've had discussions yesterday. We'll continue to have discussions this week to see how far we can go to have an intergovernmental conference this month. Obviously, all of the member states have to agree to that, and we'll have to work really, really hard to get the member states to come to that view. So look, that's a serious work in progress at the moment.
And of course, Mr. Byrne, this presidency comes just as the EU is seriously lagging behind the US and China. How will you help make the EU more competitive over the next 6 months?
Well, I think the One Market Roadmap sets out like a long series of actions that we should be implementing this year, much of which has to be done during the Irish presidency. That will make us more competitive, more resilient, and make it easier to do business in Ireland. On my agenda, the simplification agenda is really important to make it cheaper to do business, but also at protecting the basic values that make us Europeans. But we have other items such as the Savings and Investment Act, the EU Inc. proposal, and that long list on the roadmap. So our entire system is geared to trying to get agreement among the member states. It's not all on us. Member states have to agree, and the European Parliament has to agree as well. But if we can do this, I think it will be generational. It will be really important and a significant boost to the European economy.
And just finally, what would a successful presidency look like to you? And are Irish people as enthusiastic as you today?
I think Irish people are always very proud when we take over the presidency of the European Union. Irish people are very supportive of the European Union. They know the benefits that the European Union has given to peace and to economic prosperity, not just in Ireland, but across the European Union. So I think there's a huge awareness in Ireland today of what's happening. And I think Irish people will have a lot of goodwill towards government and civil servants who will be doing a huge amount of the work in meetings in Brussels and in Dublin. But today, it's a day to start the work, but also to mark the occasion.
OK. Minister Thomas Byrne, thank you so much for joining us there from Dublin Castle as Dublin takes on that role as presiding over the EU Council for the next 6 months. And now moving on, after a trip to Turkey yesterday, just days ahead of the NATO summit, the EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen has moved on to Azerbaijan today to build on EU influence in a region traditionally in Russia's orbit. For more on her ambitions, we can cross now to Baku and bring in Euronews correspondent Nadira Tudor. Good morning, Nadira. Tell us more about her visit today.
Well, this is a significant visit because it reflects just how strategically important the South Caucasus has become for the EU. President Ursula von der Leyen is set to hold talks with Azerbaijani President Ilham Aliyev. Discussions are expected to focus on 4 key areas. The first, to support the Azerbaijan-Armenian peace process. Second, to strengthen economic ties. Third, improving transport and trade links between Europe and Central Asia. And finally, to expand connectivity through the Middle Corridor. Now, the backdrop for these priorities is against Europe's changing geopolitical landscape. Since Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, the EU has not been secret about its desire to diversify both its energy supplies and its trade routes. Currently, 16 European countries import gas from Azerbaijan to Italy, and Italy being the top importer. And as a consequence, the country has become increasingly important as a gas supplier, and the Middle Corridor emerging as a key alternative trade route connecting Europe with Central Asia and China. And it's important to note that this is also von der Leyen's first visit to Azerbaijan since Azerbaijan and Armenia, the two neighbours, initialed their landmark peace agreement. So one could deduct that this makes today's meetings as much about long-term regional stability as about energy and trade. The two leaders are expected to make joint statements later this afternoon.
And just yesterday we saw the President von der Leyen, she was in Turkey with 2 EU commissioners. Tell us about that.
Well, this visit is all part of a much broader week of EU diplomacy across the region. And while President von der Leyen is focusing on the South Caucasus, there are several senior European commissioners in Turkey for high-level talks covering things like security, trade, migration and the future of EU-Turkey relations. And expected discussions include modernising the EU-Turkey customs union, regional security, migration cooperation and connectivity projects, all linking Europe with the Black Sea, the South Caucasus and Central Asia. And if we put everything into context, the visits show that European Union is looking at the region as one connected strategic neighbourhood where energy, security, trade routes, defence cooperation and political stability are increasingly being seen as intertwined.
OK, Nadira Tudor, thank you so much there for that live broadcast from Baku. Now, earlier on Europe Today, we were joined by Manfred Weber, the president of the most influential and powerful political group in the European Parliament. That's the European People's Party. Our Europe editor, Maria Today, was listening into that interview and joins me now for some analysis. Maria, what were your takeaways?
Look, I think it's, well, first of all, a comprehensive interview that ultimately touched upon the main topics that are driving the political agenda in Europe, in which, we've got to be honest, the EPP, so the Conservatives across Europe, now dominate the scene. They dominate the scene in Brussels and they dominate the scene across the different capitals in the European Council. So there has been a shift into more conservative positions from the European public itself. So to that extent, they play with an advantage over the rest. But I would argue the thing that to me struck out the most, and it is the real question to me for the rest of the year for the European Union, is China. What to do with the Chinese and the trade deficit that not only was a record last year, but if you look at the numbers so far this year, it seems that this will also be another record year when it comes to that gap between what the Chinese are selling and buying from the European Union. As it stands, every official, and I think Manfred Weber was very clear about this too, they believe that it's simply not sustainable to continue going down this path. To me, what was interesting is the Commission has decided now to take some of the heat off and wait until October. We are also expecting new tools that will be created and announced in order to deal with China if they do not level this playing field. Of course, you could argue the European Union already has many trade tools that it could have implemented had it had the political courage to do it. And I say political because the data does show these deficits cannot continue. To me, what is interesting is out of this trio of Germans, the German Chancellor, the head of the Commission, and now Manfred Weber with the EPP, he took a very strong line. You know, he said, we cannot kill our industry. And China now, that's a quote, is a serious problem for the European industry. And I particularly thought it's interesting when you said what happens after October. And he did say ultimately decisions in October will have to be made. Because of the EU having set a deadline, not triggered any countermeasures, decides to extend again this waiting period, it can only be interpreted as a sign of weakness. And Beijing will read it as such.
OK, Maria Today, our Europe editor, thank you so much for your analysis. And you can read, of course, more about that interview and all the other stories we're covering for you here on Euronews. You can check out Euronews.com. You can also reach out to us at Europe Today at Euronews.com with any of your thoughts or comments or queries. But that brings this edition of Europe Today. Thank you so much for your company as always. Take care and see you very soon on Euronews.